district. But what about, as I said to the county commissioners, your responsibilities are bigger than just a little square of downtown Wichita. Your responsibility is really to the whole city and the whole county. Well, the answer is from Dye and Merriman, who are economists, is that what we find, however, is a negative relationship. Municipalities that use TIF do worse as a whole. In other words, economic growth in the city as a whole is less for those cities that make extensive use of TIF financing than those that don't. So yeah, TIF is good for the privileged developers that develop within a TIF district, but for the city or the region as a whole, it's not such a good deal. And you can kind of understand this because what a TIF district does is it's government saying, well, we've got this special area, be it downtown or be it near Central and Hillside or 13th and Oliver or Grove or wherever it is, that we'd like to see something happen. So we're going to end up paying for, some special subsidies for this developer through the TIF district. Well, as we know, at least if you believe in limited government and the superiority of free markets, as I do, that when people are left to their own devices to figure out where to invest capital, that's when we're going to get the most effective and most efficient allocation of capital. When politicians try to do this, which is what TIF districts do, we end up with capital being allocated for reasons other than market reasons. We end up with capital being invested in or directed to a certain place for, well, political reasons. And politicians, of course, have different set of incentives than do people working in markets, and that leads to a less than optimal allocation of the capital. So that's a big problem that I have regarding public policy implications of TIF districts. Furthermore, TIF districts oftentimes represent centralized government planning on a grand scale. If you read the agenda report for this expansion of the downtown arena TIF, you can see that they've got this street planned out for this mix of residential and commercial, and this street is going to be a certain type of district, and they've got this all planned out. And as people try to build things within the TIF district, they're going to try to enforce that type of plan. And does government do a good job planning those types of things as people do with their own capital? And I think that they don't. This is kind of obliquely related a little bit, but a couple weeks ago, I think Deb Miller, the Secretary of Transportation, she had an op-ed piece in the Wichita Eagle where she was trying to promote the value of highway construction, and she mentioned the K-96 highway running towards northeast Wichita, how valuable that was, and promoted a lot of job growth and development in northeast Wichita. And I'm sure it did. There are a lot of jobs and growth out in northeast Wichita. I live right along there myself. But what's the flip side of that? Well, the flip side is you've got a school board president, no matter of fact, a whole school district, it says, well, these inner city schools are now neglected and in bad shape, and we got to have a big bond issue. And of course, they're maybe neglected and in bad shape because everybody's moved out along K-96 to the suburban type of areas. And then you've also got people like the mayor who believes in a strong downtown. Well, downtown's not strong as it was because people have used the highways that have been built to move out to suburban type of areas. And then, of course, you've got the global warming alarmists who say, well, these people driving on these highways every day is not good, and we've got to do a lot of expensive stuff to mitigate all that carbon that they're pumping out. So just kind of an aside there as well. Another public policy aspect of TIF districts is that citizens are confused. Matter of fact, I'm convinced that at least half the city council is totally confused as to the true mechanism of what goes on behind these TIF districts. Now, when I started testifying in opposition to TIF districts and tax abatements, that would have been, I think, earlier this year. I didn't go back and look. The mayor and Councilman Jeff Longwell engaged me in semi-debate as I was speaking in front of the city council. I don't think I defended myself very well because I was kind of nervous. That was before I'd done a lot of talking in front of the city council. But the mayor said some things, and Jeff Longwell did too, and he called me on the phone later that day, that tells me that I don't think they really emphasize or really understand how this money getting pumped back into a TIF district really benefits the developers at the exclusion of non-TIF developers. So I think citizens are very confused about this, and like I said in my testimony that I read a little bit earlier, I think that really benefits the politicians, because if they were just writing checks to these guys, people would be maybe upset about it, but this TIF district, kind of confuses things. And here's, for example, a quote from Sharon Ferry. This was in the newspaper from an article this August, I think it was, that the Dion Leffler, I think, was the main reporter in the Wichita Eagle that talked a lot about the TIF districts in Wichita. She says, under a TIF, the additional property taxes generated by new development are used to repay bonds. She's absolutely correct up to there. But then she continues, no dollars go to private developers. Well, it's true. Those tax dollars go to pay off the bonds. But why were the bonds issued? To build stuff for the private developers that non-TIF developers would have to buy themselves. So I think she's very much mistaken in that, or I don't know, maybe she really understands, but it doesn't fit her public policy goals that she wants to do, so she says that. Now, one of the things I think that Alan Bell talked about last week too was what we call the but-for criteria, and that's one of the strongest arguments that boosters of TIF financing have, and that is, well, if we didn't give these, these favors back to the developers, like the Kenmore Shopping Center or something like that, it would never happen. So, since it would never happen if we did this, if we don't collect property taxes for them for a while, that's not exactly what happens, but you get what I mean, then the city as a whole doesn't really lose anything because it never would have happened anyway. Well, I think all the states that have TIF or TIF-like type of things, they require the but-for type of thing, and generally, like it is in Wichita, I think, it's pretty much the developer saying, well, if we don't get this TIF financing, we're not going to do this, and city staff takes them at their word, and who wouldn't say that for millions of dollars of financing? So, so the but-for test is kind of a thing that probably isn't really all that meaningful. There's also the effect on overlapping taxing districts to consider, because when the city of Wichita gives up the right to, or gives TIF financing, it also affects the city, and also, the county, and also the school board as well. Well, you might think so, but as John and I learned, that may not entirely be true. With the county, it definitely is true, because the county is going to give up their claim on the increased tax revenue, and that was part of the basis of the complaint that the county had against the city this summer, and that the city was going to end up financing a lot, the county was going to be ending up financing a lot of things that they thought the city should have to pay for themselves. Now, you might think that school districts suffer also as well, because after all, they're not going to be collecting the property taxes that they might otherwise collect. And John and I ventured down to the school board, I think at the end of August it was, and we tried to convince the school district, because they do have veto power like the county does over the formation of these TIF districts, that you guys are going to be giving up money that you have a claim to, so therefore don't go along, don't agree to this TIF district. Well, we got slapped down, because what happens is that through the Kansas school financing law, I'm not sure I understand it myself, and I'll tell you what, there's I think only one guy in Kansas who does. They compute something like called assessed value per student, and they rank the school districts, and if your assessed value per student goes down, the state financing format is going to be adjusted so that the state of Kansas will send you some more money to make up for that. And as it turns out, at least according to the arithmetic that the school district convinced John and I was true, that even if they gave up a lot of tax revenue, the state of Kansas would make it up, not exactly, but it was pretty close. So the school district is made whole. Now the problem is, who makes them whole? Well, somebody in Kansas has to pay those taxes, and I think, as I wrote, and I don't know if it was in the newspaper or not, but so as long as they get their money, they don't really care who pays it, as long as they get their money. So then the final question is, then are TIF districts without cost? Well, the answer is no. It really does cost in foregone tax revenue, plus the inefficiency of the government redirecting investment from one place to another, leading to the question, will anyone develop anything outside of TIF districts? And I think the answer is, for something near downtown Wichita, the answer is no. I mean, why would you do anything outside of the TIF district? Because it's such a benefit to you. So those are kind of just some public policy aspects of the TIF districts that I don't really think Alan Bell talked about last week, just focusing on the mechanics and the legal aspects of how the TIF districts work. So.